Today, we have one of those very special opportunities for guests to hear from an award-winning entrepreneur, from our student entrepreneurs who are showing by example, and to get hands-on experience in a small pivot challenge. This event will be very interactive and guests are really encouraged to get involved. Students, take advantage of the opportunity like this will really enrich your experience at the university and be another step in your journey to becoming career ready when you graduate. To pivot means to change, to switch direction, to be flexible. Businesses of all sizes have faced incredible challenges with the uncertainty created by the COVID pandemic. Some have watched their revenues fall when customers chose to stay home to protect themselves or others, or were prevented from walking through their doors because of restrictions imposed to try to get the situation controlled enough to avoid overwhelming our healthcare systems. We're still struggling with that right now. Businesses have been forced to pivot to stay alive. At the same time, many new opportunities have opened up for entrepreneurs who are creative and flexible. Curbside and home delivery of every kind of product has become critical, so there are opportunities in supply chain. Those who provide services have had to adapt their premises, processes, and equipment to be able to continue. This has created opportunities for businesses who can support their efforts. Okay, who knew one of those opportunities was going to be toilet paper? No one knew that, but that's okay. We discovered that as we moved forward. DSB recently partnered with MyTax. MyTax is a Canadian nonprofit that works with universities to provide research and training programs for students. Together, we provided funding to support small businesses trying to adapt and evolve in the face of the pandemic. 10 students were funded by MyTax and DSB to help local entrepreneurs pivot to meet the challenges created by COVID. That is what entrepreneurship is. It is seeing opportunity in adversity and moving to take advantage of it. It requires nerve, energy, and a bit of luck. So this morning, we're going to talk about entrepreneurship and get creative as we explore the power of pivot. We're going to begin with our keynote speaker, Craig Elias, who will share his journey to becoming an incredibly successful entrepreneur. You'll have a chance to ask some questions through the chat. This will be followed by a 10-minute break and then a discussion with our panel of student entrepreneurs. Then it will be time to dig in with our interactive pivot activity, and you'll be separated into breakout rooms for that portion of the morning. Then we'll all come back together for our wrap up and awarding some prizes. So now I'm going to hand our virtual stage over to Brandy Old, who will be introducing our very special guest speaker. Brandy?
Thanks, Kelly. I'm very excited to be introducing one of my very close colleagues, Craig Elias, today. I'm going to read out a few things and go a little off script because him and I work really closely together. So if you didn't know, Craig was user 3,956 out of the 700 million users on LinkedIn. So I'm going to tell you right now, go and add Craig on LinkedIn. If you don't have a LinkedIn profile, he will haunt you for the rest of your life. He is an award-winning entrepreneur, an educator, and a passionate startup advisor. And he also does tons of pitch coaching. And he's recently helped a startup with 2 different 100,000 pitch competitions in less than 24 hours while he was preparing a presentation for today. So he knows all about the hustle and the power of pivots, which is why we've got him here today. His first startup went from an initial launch to winning $1 million in a global billion-dollar pitch idea competition to being funded by a tier 1 US-based venture capitalist and twice being named by Dow Jones as one of the 50 most promising companies in North America in less than 24 months after launching. Now, I coach entrepreneurship and focus on the very early stage of discovery, and we generally don't see anything like this until you've hit year 3. So the fact that he was able to get this type of recognition within 24 months is astounding. He's a startup mentor for the Alchemist Accelerator in San Francisco. He's on an advisory board for South by Southwest in Austin, Texas, which has gone virtual this year and is happening in March. They actually had to pivot. It's usually a week-long conference and they have student tickets this year. So if you're looking for some more awesome experiential learning, check it out. It's where Twitter was born. It's a really great, fun experience. And Craig is also a National Growth Advisor for Goldman Sachs and Babson's College 10,000 Small Business Program in Boston. He is the most recent recipient of the World Federation of Colleges and Polytechnics biannual Gold Award of Excellence in Entrepreneurship for the last 6 years. And he's been an entrepreneur in residence at Bow Valley College in downtown Calgary, where he runs Calgary's Innovation Rodeo, which you'll hear a little bit more about, which is a really wonderful experience. And all of the panelists today have participated in that rodeo. And a part of that, he's also got 3 student-focused pitch competitions, one with Venture Quest, one with 150 Startups, and the Inventures Student Track. He coaches startups to generate early revenue and gives away over $100,000 each year to help post-secondary students across the province become first-time entrepreneurs. So if you're even thinking about a side hustle or any kind of thing related to entrepreneurship, Craig is your guy. He loves to connect. He loves to work with students. He could be anywhere in the world, and he chose to be at Bow Valley College because he believes in Albertan post-secondary students. So ask your questions, get to know Craig. He's a true mentor and coach for everyone. So I really encourage you to get to know him. He's a really, really wonderful connector. So Craig, welcome. I'm excited to chat to you today about pivots.
Randy, thank you very much. I'm just going to move my slides over, and then, so I'm assuming everybody can see my slides.
Sure can.
Okay. And it's funny, I had a speaker yesterday. His name was Ian Hathaway, and he's all about, in fact, where is his book? I'll put it away already. It's all about startup communities, and he talks about this group of people in the ecosystem called instigators. Sometimes, you know, the kind of people that stir things up. I'm just one of those instigators. So I want to make sure before we get started, though, we talk a little bit about pivots, just so people get a really good understanding of what a pivot is. If you haven't heard the term, it's used all the time on a very regular basis in the startup community. What it means is that you were going to go do one thing, but because maybe people didn't want it, or you couldn't make money at it, or you couldn't deliver it, you found a way to either solve that problem you were solving a different way, or helping people solve a completely different problem. I think of Raoul, who was a scientist in Norway way back in the early 1900s. He was going to do this trip to the North Pole. He even had secured this 400-ton triple-masted schooner to go to the North Pole. And shortly before he was on his way to the North Pole, he found out that somebody got there before him. Now, does anybody know who was the second person to run a 4-minute mile, or the second person to climb Mount Everest? He's like, I'm not going to be a number 2. So what did he do? He did a total pivot. And in his case, he actually pivoted his geography, and he ended up being the first person ever to reach the South Pole. So pivots are like, you get started down this journey and you're on this path and you have a clear goal in mind, and all of a sudden something comes along and you can't do that. And now you need to find a way to switch. So one of the things I've learned in life, and especially if you want to be an entrepreneur, that one of the first things you have to decide is whether you want to be rich, or whether you want to be successful, or whether you want to be right. And if you want to find a way to be successful or rich, then you need to find a way to be flexible. You need to find a way to still accomplish what you're trying to get done, but very often you have to find a totally different way to get there. Now, what I'm going to do, because I've got a question, and I'm hoping most people, now, Brandy.
Yes.
Is it okay to ask people to turn their camera on, because I want to see people's faces for the next minute or two?
I think that should be okay. I don't see why, unless we crash a Zoom for some reason, but we'll figure it out.
So if we can get people to turn their cameras on. So I want to ask a question. I want to see people sort of raise their hands, or you're able to sort of, if you want to do it remotely, put your hands up. But here's the first question I want to ask people. How many people here are thinking one day they would like to have their own business? Who would like to have their own business one day, even if it's a side hustle? Who's like, I see some of you going like, no, I am never going to be an entrepreneur. I see you right in the middle. Yeah, I don't even know your name. Let me just go, hold on. I'll see if I can mouse over. I can't tell who it is. So here's the thing. If you want to be an entrepreneur, when's the best time to get started? Maybe will unmute themselves and say, when's the best time to get started to be an entrepreneur?
Right now.
Right now. Who says right now?
I do, Craig.
Peter, somebody other than
Peter.
Peter. Peter's heard this speech before. How about somebody other
Oh,
than
sorry, Craig. Okay, I won't take the stage.
This is good. Who else? Somebody other than Peter who wants to say, when's the best time to become an entrepreneur?
Right now.
Okay, right now. Okay, but now here's the question. Why right now was a really good time to become an entrepreneur?
Because it's not just about bringing it to life. There's a lot of thinking that has to go into it. There's a lot of planning. There's a lot of networking that has to go into it. So you start as early as you can before you actually birth it.
So here's my argument to everybody on this call, especially if you're a student. The best time to become an entrepreneur is when you are a student. And the reason is there's a magic word you can use that gets almost anybody you ask to help you. Anyone want to guess what that magic word is that lets you get help? Anybody brave enough to guess? Anybody?
Student.
Student,
Sorry.
yeah, it's a total magic word. You can pick up the phone, call almost anybody and go, hi, my name is, and I am a student. And the nanosecond you say student, people are like, how can I help? The problem is you phone these same people after you've graduated. You can't use the S word anymore. And what ends up happening is you pick up the phone and you call this guy and you go, hi, Bruce, my name is Craig. They're like, who are you? What are you selling? Why are you calling me? How did you get my cell phone number? So it's so true that if there was ever a time, now is the best time to become an entrepreneur. And when you get started and you reach out to these people, I learned a really cool process from a lady named Heidi Neck, who is one of my favorite people to turn to. Brandy's part of my team that I tap into on occasion. Heidi is another one. She taught me this whole process called enrolling. So when you reach out to people and you've got an idea, what we're asking for is just their time. We're asking for some help. It's amazing how often people will help you if you just ask. So I'm just going to move this screen out of the way and I'm going to keep going because for me, it's all about starting now. I've done a ton of research on the impact of student entrepreneurship or youth entrepreneurship. It actually turns out that being an entrepreneur when you're younger, you actually make more profit as a business owner at an early age than a later age. And this data is based upon tracking every incorporated company with 2 employers or more over a 15-year period, like every single company in Canada. And this is the trend. So one of the things I'm a big believer of is what Richard Branson talks about, is if someone gives you a really awesome opportunity, you always say yes. And if you don't know how, you'll figure it out along the way. So I'm going to share a bit of my story, which most people don't know, which is when I was doing my executive MBA, I decided at some point I might want to be an entrepreneur. I was 36 at the time when I started my executive MBA. Said if I was going to be an entrepreneur, I want to do it before I'm 40. So during my executive MBA, I took a couple of different courses, one around what's called new venture creation. That was an option. I took that one. The other one was called technology commercialization. So in this technology commercialization course, the idea is you write a full business plan, you do all these financial analyses for this business. And what I decided I wanted to do is I wanted to make it real. So I just happened to have a friend who at the time was the chief operating officer for a company that was about to launch an e-grocer initiative, so shipping groceries to your house. His name was David. And I convinced my 2 group members, Michelle and Graham, to turn this into a real case. So when we're done, we'll have some real experience. Unfortunately, 2 weeks into that 13-week program or that 13-week course, what happens is David gets let go. My 2 group mates, Graham and Michelle, they decide they're going to turn this into a fake exercise and just continue, but do it as a fake exercise. I went away and I found a different company. And I did the same thing, full financial analysis, all their business plan, everything. So what ended up happening is that when I got my chance to be in this pitch competition for $1 million and someone says, we need a business plan, I'd already done all of that stuff. It was way easier the second time round than the first time round. So what I'm hoping happens today is that you'll learn a few things that you can use, that maybe when you get an opportunity to start your own business, you can do exactly this. So you heard what happened, got picked as one of the most promising startups in all of North America twice, ended up actually on NBC News, living down in California, living a complete life of Riley is the term. Everything I touch turns to gold. When I get into the contest, I was single, but before I moved to California, I met this awesome lady. Her name is Heather. And we decided early on that we wanted to make sure we have a family because we're both in our early 40s. So I moved to California. She stays here and I commute every other week. And lucky enough, 6 months in, what happens is Heather, my wife, gets pregnant and I moved back home to be a dad because I promised myself and Heather that I'm not going to be a successful entrepreneur with a ruined marriage and dysfunctional kids. This is my son. We get to spend a fair bit of time together. We're in scouting. And does anybody want to guess which of those kids in there might be my son? Anybody want to guess which one might be my son by chat or something else?
The orange shirt.
That would be a really good guess, but it turns out, no, my son's the overachiever. He's the one with the 2 guns. I always try to find a way to expose my son to interesting things. So we actually got involved in a hackathon earlier this year. And first prize was $10,000. And this was us as a group. Like I got to know Derek, the guy in the gray shirt, before we actually got together. But the rest of us got together on Friday night at a bar before this hackathon. And first prize is $10,000. My goal was to introduce my son to something unique and different. I was thinking that if we're lucky, we would end up winning second prize. Second prize was $5,000. Turns out I was wrong. We actually won the whole $10,000, and my son got to put $1,400 towards a sailing trip. And as you heard already, I'm pretty good at helping people win pitch competitions. This is Julie. She won a $100,000 pitch competition when she was in Vancouver, and she's on her way to the airport when she actually texted me this picture because she was flying to Calgary for a different $100,000 pitch competition, and which she ended up winning that less than 24 hours. Yes, I've been on LinkedIn longer than most people. So if you're going to send me a LinkedIn connection request, do me a favor. Make sure you, if you can, do it today, or make sure you send me a message so I know you're a student from U of L. I don't have a whole lot of space left. I'm capped out at 30,000 connections, and I'm getting reasonably close. So if I don't recognize somebody, I tend to be a little pickier. I've been able to do some stuff at Babson College, which is, I think, one of the best colleges in the United States. Students there, on average, when they graduate, make more money than alumni from every other post-secondary except from MIT, yes, South by Southwest, Alchemist, and Bow Valley College. I have traveled and I've spoken at really cool incubators and accelerators across Canada, United States, Australia, and Europe. I have this really cool collection of awesome people that I tap into on occasion, because sometimes I need to bounce ideas off people. So anywhere from like Austin to Helsinki, I have this awesome group of people. And the reason I tap into these folks is I run a program called 150 Startups. What we do is we try to find a way to help students become first-time entrepreneurs. And the idea is to create role models across campuses. And when we're done with these students, the ones that win get to go to a 5-week boot camp down in Silicon Valley. So one of the people on the panel, his name is Cole. Cole tells a story how he was in a pitch competition I ran, and the way he tells the story, or I've heard him tell the story, is he got his teeth kicked in, but it just turned out that in the audience was this awesome lady named Aja Nadeem, who's like, you should come down to Silicon Valley. You should be in this 5-week boot camp. So Cole went. He was one of 80 startups from 23 countries around the world. At the end of 5 weeks, he got a few minutes to pitch his idea to 200 angel investors and VCs. His company got picked as the most investable out of all of them. And I haven't talked to Cole for a couple of months. Last time I talked to him, he now has a 17-person company out by the airport. Daria, who will join us at 10, she won a couple of summers ago. She went down. She recently got a 6-figure investment from someone down in California. This is Jason. Jason's one of my other favorite stories to actually tell. Jason showed up at this program we run a couple of years ago with this idea that I didn't understand. It's like, So all these people buy these Pokemon cards, but in these cards are these codes to do stuff online. And he realized that most people don't use the codes online. So he created a trading platform. And the last time I talked to Jason, he was on track to sell something like 8 million Pokemon codes this year. And he's making 6 figures every single month. The 4th person on our panel is going to be Peter. So Peter tied this year for first, and he has won $10,000. He is on track to go down to the boot camp for 5 weeks in June because they postponed the September one, but he got to do the virtual version. And all of these students are on this journey of getting to a business that grows. So there is this framework that is used extensively across the province. So not just at U of L and not just at Lethbridge, but this is commonly used across the entire province for almost anybody involved in technology commercialization or startups. And it's this whole journey of what are the things that you should be doing first before you do the things that maybe that you want to do. There is this term called premature scaling, that if you do the wrong things in the wrong order, what ends up happening is you waste all your time, money, effort, and energy because you didn't do the things at the very beginning that are important to create this foundation for you to be more likely to be successful as an entrepreneur. So the first thing that's really important if you want to be an entrepreneur is you have to be passionate. Now, the challenge is that in general, people are passionate about the wrong thing. People start out being passionate about the solution that they have. It turns out if you're stuck on the solution you're trying to sell, that you're not very flexible, you come across as completely uncoachable. And when you're uncoachable, nobody wants to mentor you. So the secret isn't being passionate about what it is that you actually sell. The secret is to find a way to be passionate about the problem that you want to solve. Or you want to be passionate about the people who you're actually going to help. And I know that sometimes this is really hard. So one of the things that helped me, now I came across this book when I was 40. It was and might still be one of the best-selling business books that has ever come out. And in this book, there's a chapter called Chapter 5. Chapter 5 is called the hedgehog concept. And in this hedgehog concept is really this discussion around what are you passionate about? What are you gifted at? And what can you get paid to do? So my apologies. I have 2 dogs. One of them is scratching at my door. If I don't let him in, he's going to keep going. So try to think while I go open my door for my dog, what is it you're passionate about? If you didn't have to earn money, what would you spend your time doing? Gifted. Gifted is things that come to you really easily. Gifted very often turns out if you have a lot of things to do, you do these things first. Not because you've done them for a really long time, but because it's really easy. Then the question is, how do you find a way to get paid? So let me go let my dog and hold it. So he's a 12-year-old dog and he's, partially blind and partially deaf. So he kind of gets away with a lot of different things, one of which is interrupting on occasion. So pivoting, I think when we start this whole journey around how do we figure out what do we want to be passionate about, we can actually prepare to pivot in advance. One of the things that I talk about on a regular basis is this sort of 2x2 or 3x3 or 4x4 matrix. The idea is across the top, once you've done this self-reflection, try to think about who are the people that you're passionate about helping. So in my case, it turns out it's students, homeless, new Canadians. Those are the 3 I focus on. But across the top, what you want to do is you want to put the people you would like to try and find a way to help. On the left, you try to figure out what are the problems that these people have. So you can find different problems maybe you can help people solve. The idea is, and I use this example here of, let's say, helping homeless with a housing idea. If you start with that idea and it turns out for whatever reason, you can't find people that are interested in it, you can't find a way to make money, or you can't find a way to deliver it, you can find problems that are similar or strategically adjacent. Because what happens when you start doing anything, you start building this expertise, you begin to know something about homelessness or housing, or you start building relationships with certain people that are also solving that problem. So when you have to pivot, you want to think to yourself, how can I find a way to keep something the same so I'm not starting from absolute scratch, and you're much more likely to then become successful. So maybe just take 15 seconds and just think to yourself, if there were people that you had the opportunity to help solve a problem, who would those people be? Who would you like to solve a problem for? And hopefully you can come up with 2 or 3 different people that you could solve problems for. And then think about, what are some of the problems you might want to solve? So if you had the opportunity, what problems would you like to solve? And again, the idea is to come up with 2 or 3. The intent then is, how do you find a way to figure out what are the different things you could do to solve problems for certain people? And you end up with this matrix of all these different ideas. The cool thing is that once you have something that you're passionate about solving, it's easier to get other people involved in what you're doing. One of the things I've learned in the last 15 years since my first startup is this thing called propinquity. Propinquity is the impact of nearness, geographical, psychological, and sometimes what I also call chronological nearness. People that have things in common tend to help people that have similar things in common. So the things you can have in common with someone, first of all, are these things called aspirations. Like, how would you like to find a way to leave the planet or people on it somehow better as a result of what you do? That's the aspirations. That's really powerful. You can draw a really strong connection based upon having common aspirations. Maybe it turns out that you don't have common aspirations, but maybe you have common values. What are these things that you're not willing to give up in order to be able to have an impact or be successful? My values are family, creativity, and persistence. And anybody who's doing those sort of things, I want to try and find a way to help. The other way you can find things in common, you can find things in common with people based upon your interests. Like, what are the things that you like to do? In my case, one of the things I like to do is mountain biking, skiing, although I haven't done it for a while. My son's now taking it up. I'm going to get back into skiing. Scouting is a big thing for me. And in my neighborhood, we have an outdoor hockey rink and we have our own Zamboni. Those are the things that you can use to start building these connections with other people around. So when you decide you're going to start something, having those relationships or the problems you're trying to solve in common, right? So relationships, because you got these things in common, allows you to then go do something. Now, one of the things that I'm a big believer of is that when you first get started, I think you might want to think about, especially today, how do you start with just a side hustle? Something that's part-time, you can do while you're going to school. It allows you to sort of dip your toe into the world of entrepreneurship. Then at some point later, maybe you find the right people or the right idea, or you find the right resources, then you decide you're going to take on a full-blown business. So there are these 10 things to get done, but if you're only going to have a side hustle to get started, you don't have to do all 10, you just have to do the first 4. So we'll spend a little time on these, but find the right things to be passionate about, not the product, but the problem you're solving or the people you want to help. The next thing is understanding your competition. And we'll spend some time hopefully helping you understand that you always have competition. And one of the mistakes that people make when they start out is they say, but mine's different because I'm combining a nail salon with a coffee shop and nobody else does this. Well, that might be true, but the problem is whatever it is that people are getting out of buying from you, they can solve that problem a totally different way. They can just go to Starbucks, buy a coffee, and go to any nail salon. Now, it turns out in this specific case, the student I'm actually helping, her whole value proposition is if you want to go to a nail salon, you have to make an appointment. Well, in her case, it turns out that the appointment isn't necessary. And if you show up and it's going to be a little while, it's not a big deal because she has a cafe that we attached to her coffee shop. Finding something really small to go focus on initially. One of the mistakes that people make is they come up with this big idea and they go, anybody or everybody can become our customer. And we'll talk about why that's not the right thing to do. When you get to the point that you decide you want to move beyond a side hustle, then what you want to do is you want to go away and you want to validate your assumptions, your hypotheses, because before you spend money building something, you need to make sure that you're right. So there's a whole process around validating your assumptions or your beliefs. You want to make sure that it's viable. So the question is, can you actually make money at it? Just because people want it doesn't mean you can make enough money at it to make it worth pursuing. You then want to try and find a way to create what is called a compelling value proposition. I call it a 7-second sale. The idea is, how can you create instant interest in your product or your service? And the way you do that is you don't describe the product or service. You describe the outcome of using your product or your service. So maybe in the case of Peter, who we're going to hear from, it's all about being able to engage youth in voting. And he's got an interesting statistic about the percentage of youth that could vote but don't. It's a crazy number. I'm a big believer of then going away and building some sort of initial website, something so that people can actually find you when they go to look for the way that you solve the problem or hear of you. This 150 startups idea that I have, when I first came up with the idea, I went away, didn't get a web page right away, but I got a Twitter handle and a Facebook page. And then I started telling all these people what I was working on, and I could hear people in the background typing. And I'm like, you're looking it up on Google. I can totally tell. And sure enough, what did they find? They would find my Twitter handle, which led them to the Facebook page. And all of a sudden, they're like, wow, you're actually going to do this. One of my favorite examples of someone who built a really good web presence, and it's around not the brand or the name of your product or service, but it's the product category. Like, what is it that you're actually selling or the problem you're actually solving? One of my favorite examples is a family out in Medicine Hat. They have what's called Medicine Hat Meats. Now, people don't remember the name of the company, but what they remember is this really cool product they have, which is called soft beef jerky. So they own the domain name and the social media handles related to soft beef jerky. Now, I found them because in one of my son's camping trips was in the winter that we were prepping for. So the idea is you're going to do a 9-kilometer hike in unbroken snow on snowshoes with a 45-pound pack into the middle of nowhere, pitch a tent, and then you pitch the tent, you then come back a totally different way the next day. And there's no way you can do that without having trained. So we were doing some training, and the first day we did this, we went for a reasonably short hike with a small pack, and that day it was only like -5. We took regular beef jerky because my son loves beef jerky. But then the next time we went, it was like 3 times farther with a bigger pack, and unfortunately it's -20. And that's the day he found this stuff called soft beef jerky. Because if you try eating regular beef jerky at -20, you're going to break a tooth. The next one is do something small, like just get started. Don't wait to make it really big because you'll postpone it. The sooner you get started, the more likely you are to be successful. The data suggests that if you are 6 months late to market with a product or service, you lose 1/3 of all the profit you ever would have generated. So find a way to just get started, right? And then for me, it's all about doing the right things in the right order. So the first thing is making sure you solve a problem. There's lots of things that people would like to have, but if it's not something you take away, they're less likely to become your customer. So in this big lean canvas that Ash Maurya talks a lot about, he has a smaller version called a leaner canvas. And the idea here is before you even start thinking about what product or service you want to sell, you need to do some early work before you get there. The dilemma is once you come up with a solution, people fall in love with their own solution, they're less likely to go backwards to do the things they need to do before they get to the step where they should be. So If you're going to find a way to solve a problem, you want to find a way to help people avoid, prevent, reduce, minimize, mitigate, or eliminate something. These are painkillers. People spend more money on painkillers than on vitamins. So you want to try and find a way to take away something negative rather than give people something positive. You then need to understand what are all the different ways that people can solve this problem, which is called competition. Competitors are people that do stuff similar to what you do. Competition is a totally different way, perhaps, to solve the problem. And in Ash's approach, he talks about these different alternatives. I'll give you an example. If we all owned jewelry stores somewhere in Lethbridge, we're all making $5 million in revenue, we don't compete with other jewelry stores. We compete with all the other ways that men who spend more money on jewelry than women generally do can find a way to their significant other, I love you or I'm sorry. So if you own a jewelry store, you don't just compete against other jewelry stores. You compete against flowers, chocolate, perfume, purses, trips, pets, all those other things. So it's really important when you look at these alternatives, you think about what are the other ways of solving the problem or getting the same outcome. The next thing you got to figure out is who's going to pay you. These are called customers. And it's really important to differentiate between a customer and a user. So let's pretend you were selling services to help people that go away to university be able to find housing easier off campus or in campus, wherever that is. You might think, well, the customer is the student, but it turns out the customer isn't the student. It turns out the customer is the mom of the student who wants to try and find a way to make sure that their child's first year's experience at university is actually a good one. So when you look for these customers, we're not just looking for specific customers that have a certain age or live in a certain place or care about certain things. We're trying to find those people that are going to become our customers in the next little while. So what this requires is a little bit of focus. We can't just say we want to go help every mom or every youth, because the hard part is the opportunity is bigger than the team or the resources you might originally have. So what you want to be able to find a way to do is say, how do I find a way to focus on a smaller group of people and help those people so there's a better match between what I have and what I can do. And then once you get to that point, you want to have a good look and say to yourselves, is this something that I actually want to pursue? So I'm a big believer that before you go away and write a business plan, you should have a look at the financials around your business. Is it something viable? Is it something worth spending all this time and effort to go away and actually write a business plan for? So I have a spreadsheet that I used to use when I was teaching entrepreneurship at the University of Calgary. I had this course I taught called Entrepreneurship 201. The idea back then was students would write a business plan and do the financial analysis. But it turned out the vast majority of students, because this was a course for non-business school students, most of them didn't know how to use Excel. So I had to build a spreadsheet that would make it easier for them to do their financial analysis. So I built it. And of course, they busted it. And then I fixed it. And of course, they busted it. And then I fixed it. And of course, they busted it. And over a series of 3 years, it got busted and fixed so many times that now it's really robust. So if you want to look at what could be the potential for the business that I'm thinking about, you can use this spreadsheet. If you fill in the form, it sends you the spreadsheet and a video of me watching someone over the web and then guiding them to filling out their entire financial analysis. So you can do it this way, or if you want, Maurya has this thing called Lean Stack. And if you want a free account for Lean Stack and you want to go do this a slightly different way, which I think in some respects is easier and faster, then you can use the link on the left. And the reason you want to do this before you write a business plan is two reasons. One, there's this thing called selective perception. It's like when you buy a new car, what do you see all over the road? You see that car. When all of a sudden you get a puppy, what do you see all over the place? You see dogs all over the place. What happens, unfortunately, way too often is people start this idea building process with a business plan. And the challenge is people say, what do I have? And what can I do with what I have? And it tends to limit their thinking. If you do the financial analysis first, it's all about how big could I make this company? And then what ends up happening is you write your business plan to say, how am I actually going to find a way to get there? And then the idea is once you've finished, you're going to have a look at this idea and say, is it even worth pursuing? Like, is there enough interest? Can I make enough money at it? If you can't do either of those, go find a different idea. Maybe you've got an idea that people want, but you can't make money at it. Maybe it's a way to actually pivot. How do you find a way to make money at that idea? Or maybe you're lucky. And the odds of this, unfortunately, aren't very good. That's why they call it luck, where you're right the first time round. If you're right the first time round, then maybe you get to the next stage and you start this journey of becoming an entrepreneur. This is called the Startup Commons model. It's designed by two really smart people, Valto Loikkanen out of Helsinki and Oscar Ramirez out of Barcelona. We actually had them come talk last summer. I talked about breaking this all down. And what most people don't realize is there are two parts to any business. There is the part that we all seem to be really good at, which is building the product or the service. We have an idea for something. We go gangbusters on this idea. The challenge is if you get too far ahead of yourself, that's what's called premature scaling. You need to find a way to focus on the other stuff around building out a business first. And one of the cool things I heard this past Monday on a panel that we hosted, there was a lady that talked about different types of capital. One is called social capital. So relationships, friends, things of that nature. You can leverage social capital to build this stuff out first to make sure you're on the right path before you start using financial capital to do the stuff across the top. But the hard part is most of us only have comfort in one place. We're either really good at the product piece or really good at the business piece, but we need to find a way to do both. And if you try to do both for your own idea, sometimes it's really hard. So the objective for today is we're going to have a panel. They're going to tell us where they are. You're then going to come up with ways to solve what you think might be their next problems. What should they be doing next? What should they be doing to make sure that their product or service doesn't get too far ahead of the way they built their company? Or before they spend too much time building out the company, how do they start doing something with their product or service? So when you get to Mural, you'll have something that looks a little bit like this. The intent is you pick above the line because they need some work on their product, or below the line because they need some help on their business. And they come up with different ideas. And when you get to Mural, you'll have this also as a resource. So if you want, just to make sure you've got it in advance and you want to look at this in the next little while, this might be something you want to take a picture of before we take a break. And that's where I've gotten to here, Brandy. So I wanted to open it up for questions, maybe go back and forth amongst the slides, make sure people understand this whole idea of not pursuing with the product or service until you've gotten farther along with the idea. So are there questions that people want to ask? Are there questions that have already come up, Brandy?
So I'm just going to let some folks get a couple seconds to type in any questions that you've got in the chat for Craig. And while you're doing that, Craig, I wanted to ask you, have you worked with any businesses that have failed to pivot?
Failed to pivot? Way too many.
And what would you say like the most common reason for that failure is?
The most common reason is people were focused on a product. This is what I want to sell. I am not going to change my product or service. I've already invested $100,000 or 6 months or whatever it is. And they're like, I just need some help marketing. If I can just find someone to buy one, then I can find someone to buy more. And their belief is that if they either A, add another feature or do something differently, they could all of a sudden find all these people become their customers. And the challenge there is what I often hear called as pushing rope. There's nobody pulling on your idea. So you can't even get a sense of whether it's worth pursuing. It drives me crazy because these people are so stuck and so stubborn. They're often called uncoachables, and I have encountered more than one. And I'm now to the point where I say to people, you're coming across as uncoachable. And I don't spend time with uncoachable people. And you can usually identify uncoachable people because they don't have any mentors. So one of the things I think is really important when you get started is, can you find someone to be a mentor, just to give you some guidance along the way? Because if you have a mentor and someone you talk to on a regular basis, and they're willing to help you because you have things in common, this propinquity, interest, values, aspirations, the problem you're trying to solve, or the people you're trying to help. But if you don't have those, that for me is a big indicator. Yeah, you're just too stuck on the problem or the product, and you're not on the problem or the people that you're helping.
So as we talk about being uncoachable, I know a lot of the accelerators and incubators down in Silicon Valley, like GrowthX and Y Combinator, require entrepreneurs to come in with a team.
Yes.
And we talk about kind of how those spaces play together. So do you have any tips and tricks, or any kind of points of wisdom to share with new entrepreneurs about how to be more coachable?
So first of all, if someone gives you feedback, don't go, yeah, but. Just say thank you, or even better, ask the question, what makes you say that? Or how do you think that? Try to understand the other person's perspective. Because if you're pushing back in any way, oh yeah, I tried that, it didn't work. If you're pushing back in any way, it says you're not coachable. Any feedback you've got, you want to take in. Even like this today, I am totally open to feedback to today's presentation. This is the first time I've done this presentation for this group. Is it going to be perfect? No, I am totally open to feedback. We had a session yesterday with this guy, Ian Hathaway. Later on, after lunch, I'm going to send an email to the 300 people that participated in that session. And I'm going to ask them 2 questions. On a scale of 1 to 10, how satisfied were you with what happened? And if it's less than a 10, tell me what it would take to make it a 10. I don't care about being right. I care about having an impact or about being successful. And the more open you are to feedback, the more it indicates that's what you're about.
I think that's so important, Craig. Even going out and making sure you have access and asking for that feedback is a huge way to make sure that you can scale properly and do those pivots. Without feedback from your customers or people helping you, you don't necessarily know, where the gaps are. One of the things I always talk about is when you've got an idea, it's your baby, and you don't want to hear that it's ugly, right?
There's something else here I think is really important, that when you get started, most entrepreneurs, when they start the first time round, who do they put on their team? They put on their team people they went to school with. Cole's got a story of, he brings in his friends. And I think you need to think, how do I find a way to get other people on my team? So most good startups have 3 different types of people, and you may only have 1 of each. You have a hustler. So I'm a classic hustler, someone who goes out and talks to people, makes things happen. You have a designer, someone who finds a way to make things look good. So you have a decent brand and people think you're maybe bigger than you are and are more inclined to become your customer. And the last one is the hack. Like, who is this person that finds a way to make sure things just work? Initially, you might kludge them together and it might be very manual, but what you want to try and find a way, ideally, if you can, when you're building out a team, how do you have those 3 different folks? So it may turn out that your hack might be someone in an organization that makes sure all your financials get done, all these other things. There's someone who keeps the little bits and pieces together, these operationally minded people. Most entrepreneurs don't think like that. Those operationally minded people can be super hard to find, and sometimes even super hard to get along with, because they always want to see more data, but they're a really important part of your team. So you got to find somebody like that if you can and put them on the team.
Awesome. So I got a question in the chat, and someone's wondering, what are your thoughts on network marketing? Does it actually work?
So here's the good thing about network marketing. It's hard. So if you try it, you're like, oh, it's super easy. I'll just get 10 of my friends to sell to their friends. And this for me is the flaw that most people have when they go into network marketing. They don't go in first to have these raving customers and then maybe turn the raving customers into distributors. And it's really hard. People go, oh, it's going to be easy. You get I think a really good sense of reality about how hard entrepreneurship can be when you do network marketing. And the hardest part about network marketing and the hardest part about any business is, I think, purely customer acquisition. People go, oh, I'll just build the world's greatest mousetrap and everybody will buy it. No, that's not the case. So if you went to network marketing, I think you go to it for the education. If it's a product that you're passionate about, solving a problem that you're passionate about, that helps people that you're passionate about, go. But if you're not passionate about all three things, go find something else to do instead.
I think that touches a little bit on your enrolling as well, right? And getting the people on your side for your team rather than pitching your sale.
Yeah.
So I've got a question from Justin, and he's wondering, have you ever been worried that when you share your idea with people that someone else might steal it?
Oh, everybody has that problem. Like, my idea is so good that the nanosecond anybody hears it, they're going to steal their idea. The flaw in that is it's generally not true. And this is one of the reasons why when you start a business, don't go chase a really big opportunity, because maybe there's an opportunity. Find something smaller you can pursue. But what ends up happening is you come at a certain problem with a certain perspective. And you have a certain vision of the future. And there's this journey you're going to take this product or service through to get to where you want to go. What happens is people can only see where you are today. They can't see where you're going or where you came from. I remember when I had a chance to do a tour of a Toyota factory in Japan, and I was really surprised and really intrigued how they actually invite people from all the other car manufacturers in to come see what they're doing. Because when you show up at a Toyota facility and you see what they're doing, you don't know where they've been and you don't know where they're going. So it's just a single point in time. So that's the classic flaw a lot of entrepreneurs make. The best thing you can do is tell as many people as possible about your idea to get your idea and make it better. Now, something you might want to do before you do that, you might want to try and figure out what is the product category that you're in, and how can you find a way to prevent people from being able to encroach on your idea or your market. So the way I come at this, I try to think of 2 or 3 words that describe the product, the service, or the outcome somebody gets. You want to make sure it's 15 characters or less, because if it's less than 15 characters, you can get a Twitter handle. And if you can get a Twitter handle, you can get an Instagram handle, you can get a Facebook handle. You can go away and register the domain names. So there's a really smart professor at the University of Ryerson or Ryerson University. His name is Sean Wise. Sean used to be a producer for Dragon's Den. I was on season 4, or got taped for season 4. And when Sean came out to town, he talked about the importance of owning the channel. And the channel of customers today is the internet. Google first, YouTube second. So if you can figure out what are the 2 or 3 words that become part of your product category and own all the social media handles, that's free. And maybe sucking up a couple of domain names, which is going to cost you, let's say, $10 or $15 a year. So if you're super worried, go away and do that. I mean, I had a student once, his name is Ali. He had this crazy concept for something called beef wings. The idea is you take chunks of beef, you cook them like chicken wings, you put them on a bed of banana crisp, you put some sriracha sauce on top, and you sell them at festivals. He's like, my idea is so brilliant, everybody's going to want it. I'm like, really? People are so in love with their own idea, and they're so stuck with their own problem or their own vision of the future, odds are going to borrow your idea are super small. Unless it's something like a medical device or something else, likelihood that someone's going to steal your idea is really small. The other thing is, if you've got a good idea, it's highly likely somebody else has had a similar idea. So my idea that won that $1 billion idea pitch competition, I met like 30 people, all had the exact same idea than me. What was the difference between me and them? I did something with my idea. So having an idea and doing something with it are 2 totally different things.
I absolutely agree with that, being that instigator again, Craig.
Yeah.
I've got a question from Cody, And he's wondering about that team side on the Startup Commons model. Like, how do you go out and find a partner? How do you build your team? And he's wondering if family and friends are the best or worst options, or how to go about moving forward with building that team.
I'm trying to find a way to say this. So I can't find another way. So I'm just going to say what's in my head because I've heard this term before. If you're not with a person you love, love the person you're with. So the question is, how do you find somebody today to help you fill that role? And my argument is, it's going to be people in your class. It's the first place to look. The other thing, though, you can do is you can tell all these people what you're looking for because you've no idea what happens one day. So I, after yesterday, got a call from this total stranger who's moved from Toronto to Calgary and is willing to do some free software programming and hardware development for people in a certain sector. I'm like, well, I can't think of anybody right away, but here are people in the industry. And all of a sudden I'm like, wait, I got this student named AJ. I was thinking this morning. He's on my list of people to talk to. AJ, I got to put AJ in front of this person because the two of them would totally hit it off. So when you tell people what you're looking for, the more specific you are, the easier it is for someone to go, I found somebody. I'm a big believer when you pitch, one of your last slides should always be what is called an ask. And you want to find a way to be specific. So one example is there's a lady named Sarah that I'm helping that's got this really cool app in Calgary. And what she's looking for is she's looking for somebody who used to be a VP of, I forget what the exact title was, but within charities. And she's like, a perfect person would be someone who does or used to work at Red Cross, Salvation Army, or YMCA. When you name companies specifically, someone goes, oh, hang on a second. I know a guy or I know a gal. Let me connect you with this guy. His name is Steven, who used to work at the Red Cross. But the more specific you are, the easier it is. Most of us are so afraid we're going to find somebody. We just say, well, take anybody, and nobody comes up with names.
Awesome. And I think Cody asking that question of your panelists in the latter section too will give you a really cool insight on what those 4 entrepreneurs have done so far, because I know they each have their own unique stories. I do have one last question from Brett.
Okay.
And he was wondering if you can share a little bit more about premature scaling. Specifically, how does this happen? What are the consequences and how do you avoid it?
Wow. How? Consequences and how do you avoid it? Okay, so how does it happen? It happens when people spend way too much time, money, effort, and energy building the first version of the product. Well, like, I'm going to build an app that does this. Well, before you build an app and spend all the money building an app, maybe you should build a simple web page. Maybe you should find a way to do something simple, inexpensive before you spend $5,000. My argument is, how do you spend $50? And prove that people want what you have. Once you've spent $50, then you limit yourself to $500 and say, how do I get to the next stage but not spend more than $500? When you spent $500, then if you're still correct with your assumptions or hypothesis, then you go away and spend $5,000. The consequences are this: you spend $5, $50, or $500,000 on a product or service that nobody wants, and you throw it all away. Like, there's no shortage of examples. There was an e-grocer initiative called, there were 2. One was called Peapod and there was something else. In the early sort of heady days of .com, there was $2 billion spent on building these massive infrastructures, shipping locations, logistics, all this stuff around shipping groceries to someone's home before they even had interest in someone becoming their product or service. How do you avoid this? Start out by going away and talking to total strangers. If you have an opinion that you've got something that solves a problem for a certain person, let's go talk to those total strangers. But here's the secret. When you talk to those total strangers, you're never allowed to tell them what you're selling. The first thing you got to figure out is, do they have the problem that you think they have? You can only ask questions about the past. You're not allowed to ask questions about the future. Then maybe after you've talked to 30 people and you've identified who is going to become your customer and why they become your customer and when, what's this thing that creates dissatisfaction and makes them buy now, then you get to the next step and you build what's called an MVP, minimal viable product. You build something for less than $500. Then you start sharing or socializing what it is that you have and see how much traction you can actually generate. And once you get to a certain point and you get this traction, you can start analyzing all the people that were interested. Now you can ask them forward-looking questions. Then you go on to spending $5,000 instead of $500 or $50,000. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, that does. Thank you very much.
Perfect. So with that, we're a little bit over time, but that was a really wonderful question, Brett. I wanted to make sure we got that in. And I just want to say to everyone, Craig covered a lot. He talked about both sides of starting your business, how to get going, how to pivot or change your idea, how to scale, how to build your team. There was a lot in there. And he, like I said, is a continued resource. If you've got more questions for him after today, feel free to bug him. Through Agility too, we run through the same stuff with the Lean Canvas, and we also support 150 startups. So remember, always starting your journey is about taking the right action at the right time and just getting started now. So don't get too inundated by all of this stuff floating around, and take that first step towards trying to find out your good idea. So with that, Craig, thank you so much for this keynote.
My name is Peter Herdwaller, and I'm the president and CEO of Veris Technologies, Inc. As it shows on the slide, please go to veris.ca and please critique the website once I'm done. I'd definitely like to hear your feedback. So how it started, the inception, was our current graphic designer, Divine, and I were talking during April 2019, around the time of the provincial election. And he's like, you know, where I'm from in Africa, I don't trust the elections there. They use flimsy pieces of paper. I just don't trust it at all. To which I said, they do the same thing here in Canada, except with fancier pieces of paper. And so that's kind of where the idea started. And I was in this blockchain hackathon at the time, and that's the idea popped in my head. Maybe we could combine blockchain with voting. And he's the one who designed our great logo. So he was our first member. Then I thought, you know, I need to get some help. I can't do this on my own. So I went and I talked to Brandy from Agility. And that's when she told me, buy the domain name. So I bought veris.ca, and that was kind of the first case of action that I took. I did an applied study that summer with Professor Robert Benkazi and Jefferson Gardner from Enrich on the value of blockchain in reducing vulnerabilities in Alberta's current election system. We initially had high hopes to land Alberta as our first client. And I recommend to anyone, do as many applied studies and independent studies while you can. It's a great way to get real world experience and just do what you want. Next, our advisor from Tech Connect, Suzanne, she joined the team. And then we had a bit of a hiatus over the winter. Unfortunately, I had to go to the hospital for a few months, but we came back better than ever back in February, hit the ground running. That's where I met Trey Bursnell, our current sales and operations lead. So that was great. Just a kind of piece of advice for when you're starting a team. Don't start out calling them co-founders or officers, because this implies that they have ownership, which if they do, that's nice. But if you want to be keeping your ownership, and it also implies they're employees. So CRA is going to expect you to pay EI, CPP, etc. So start off with calling them team members with benign names and legally have them signed as contracted consultants. It's a lot simpler and it'll save you a lot of headaches later on. So next I met Craig and we joined the 150 startups competition. We won second place for the landing page and we won $500 and we were hungry for more. Next, we kind of graduated from the ideation stage and got into the next stage, the problem discovery, by conducting over 30 interviews with MLAs, mayors, and city councilors. Their biggest issue was voter turnout, especially amongst youth, who only make up 7% of the voting population in Alberta. Then we entered the 150 Startups Innovation Rodeo Pitch Competition. We won both the regionals and tied for first place for the finals and won $10,000 of seed money from Craig. Thanks a lot for that. And we immediately contacted Elections Alberta and we're like, hey, let's go. And they're like, no, you guys are too early. So we pivoted a little bit. We're like, okay, maybe we can get Calgary. And they said the same thing. You guys are too early. Test it out with smaller municipalities. So we started with smaller municipalities, set our sights on that. And the advent of the coronavirus has been nothing but helpful for our business. Because large gatherings in indoor public places has become a safety hazard when you're casting your paper ballot, this has been another reason to implement our blockchain voting systems. Then our next member, Ismail Lawal, who's our software engineer and built our minimum viable product. We got him on. We also got our cybersecurity advisor, Kevin Vanderveen, and we kept Ismail to build the blockchain system. And because of that pitch competition, we were featured in lots of news media outlets such as the Lethbridge Herald and Global News, which led to a smaller municipality in southern Alberta approaching us, and we are days away from closing our first deal with them. We hope to be the first company in the world to fully supplement an election with blockchain voting. And finally, because of that news, who's a graduate from U of A, who saw us in the news and wanted to be our marketing and research advisor. And lastly, our main problem, just to conclude. So our main problem right now is the Alberta legislation, which currently prohibits online voting. So we're like, should we expand to other Alberta municipalities? Should we go to Saskatchewan where there's no prohibitive laws? Or should we do a total pivot and go for corporate boards and shareholder elections? Thank you, and I look forward to your questions and comments.
Cool. So quick question for Heather. I'm assuming, Heather, at this point, we go straight to the next speaker. All the questions will be at the end.
You are correct,
There
Craig.
we go. So with that up, next person up is Daria. So Daria, do you have any slides you want to share while you're... There we go. I can see a parking lot somewhere. Are you going to New York or are you in New York right now? Whereabouts are you? You're on mute too, by the looks of it.
Hello, everybody. Yes, I'm in New Jersey, but I will be going to New York shortly. But that's not the slides I wanted to share with you today. So they're actually these ones, and I'm gonna tell you about a startup that I'm part of called Creative Protein Solutions. So my name's Daria, and I have a background in biosciences and a master's in biotech. And initially, I went to get this education with the purpose of going to medical school. However, about halfway through my master's, I got an opportunity to get engaged with a professor who developed a technology that we found could be commercialized. And 2 years later, here I am being the CEO of the company and just being on this amazing entrepreneurial journey. And to be honest, I don't think I'm going to go to grad school at this point. So here we go. So that's me on a dairy farm last summer. That's kind of like when it really got serious for me. I want to tell you about how this all came about. So in 2014, the technology was being developed in a veterinary research lab. The professor who I work with, he has expertise in biosensors as well as dairy diseases. And so they were working to see if they can create an enzyme that can detect various markers of different things. And because of his involvement in dairy, we found that we could address a lot of these diseases. However, at that time, it wasn't necessarily clear where that will take him. But in 2017, he decided to incorporate the company with the purpose of being able to file a patent and actually be able to commercialize it. So he incorporated in 2017. The company was called Creative Protein Solutions. And then the patent about the technology was filed in 2018. And because it was developed at the University of Calgary, we did that together with Innovate Calgary. It's like their office where you partner up with when you want to commercialize stuff that you developed in the facilities. And this is what the technology looks like. So there's 3 components. It's a razor blade model. So there's one device. Then you got testing chips that you use one per test. The idea is that a farmer will go through hundreds of these every single year. And then you have the smartphone app, which collects all this data and has potential to analyze it and have it shared. And that's really where I came in. I helped develop the business model and see where we can apply it and what market can we target and how we can actually do that. So during this whole journey, a lot of this stuff was really new to me. And the first hurdle I want to tell you about is how we had to pivot with the first diagnostic to market. So generally, you might have seen this before if you kind of read about startup development and entrepreneurship. We've kind of followed this build, measure, learn process. So we build the technology as you see, and then we decided to measure and see where can we apply it. And we thought, okay, dairy industry is enormous because it's animals, is going to be way easier to enter than than human diagnostics. So let's do it. We identified a huge market in one disease called mastitis, and we thought we were going to be amazing and just address this entire market and everyone's going to buy our product. However, after talking to a lot of people in the industry, we realized that there's so many competitors that even if we're the best, it's going to be really, really hard to get them to buy the product, just because farmers also do not necessarily always want to have change, right? They always have products thrown at them, and it's going to be really difficult. So we had to pivot, and we decided to actually enter the market with a different diagnostic for milk fever. It's a smaller market. It's about 4 times as small. But the benefit of that was that there's nothing on farm that could diagnose what we were able to do. So sometimes being first to market is better if that helps you open the doors to introduce other things. You can gain people's trust, and that's what we had to learn, although the numbers we could show investors were smaller. Now, the second thing, and this is just the disease, I'm not going to go into it actually, but the second thing I want to talk about is the pivoting we had to do when we were pitching our technology. So you're pitching to a biotech, like a deep tech technology, to people who don't necessarily know anything about bio. They're just trying to give you money and make sure that they get some money back after. So we found that it was really difficult for us to communicate how we can actually, how farmers actually get value from this. There's already things they're doing. They've been farming for hundreds of years. Why is this worth it for them? And other than that, investors generally want to see, how exactly are you going to make their money back? That's really the only thing. So you have to show them there's a market, you have potential to make it in the market, and they also want to see some kind of hockey stick projection. So we always show them there's an opportunity. It's great. There's almost 300 million there's almost 300 dairy cows around the world. But really, it came down to learning that they want to see this. They want to see what is, in numbers, the return on investment for the farmer. So we talked to hundreds of people in the industry, and we come up with this calculation, and we're able to prove that, in fact, for every dollar they spend on our technology, they'll get $6.50 back. And then we had to do it for the next disease to show that we're not just making this up. It's like there's a real return. And I think after we started providing information like this, it showed investors that not only, this technology is worth it, but also that we're really serious about how we approach our value proposition. And then this is the hockey stick we generally show them. If you can't at least, imagine the hockey stick, then the question for them is, how are you actually going to execute and, make millions and millions of dollars with this technology? And when you're in biotech, you generally want to also think about the long-term strategy of how you're going to, exit. And for us, as with many, biotech or diagnostic or healthcare companies, you want to partner up with one of these big guys. So right now we're in the validation stage. We're about to go to farms and test it out, and hopefully we can enter the market this June. But the challenge I have for you guys is how should we commercialize our smartphone app? Right now it's free because we want to encourage a rapid adoption of the technology. But at some point we want to introduce a premium subscription model. So my question is, what should we consider? Should we partner up with certain companies, or should we just sell the data, or just throw it back at the farmers in an analyzed form? Which one of these pathways is going to bring us to the best possible outcome, bring the most value to the farmer, and allow us to charge the most for it? And if you ever have questions, you want to talk about biotech or life sciences and entrepreneurship, I'm always happy to have that conversation. So you can always reach me at this email and that phone number. Thank you.
Okay, so next up is Cole. So Cole would be my guinea pig. Cole was the first person that went down to Draper University and hit a total home run. So Cole's going to tell his story about how we got there, what he's done since, and what's the challenge he's going to give everybody. Cole.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Craig. Let me just quickly share my screen. All right. So as Craig mentioned, my name is Cole Rosentreter. I'm the founder and CEO of Pegasus Imagery. And what we're doing as a company is developing aircraft and sensor systems that are needed to deliver autonomous data collection at scale. So this is me. What you're probably not seeing, though, is what happened before this. So if you haven't figured it out by my hairline, I didn't start this company out of high school. So a little bit of background that actually leads into why. So I spent 15 years in the Canadian military. Most of that was actually in an operational unit for the balance of it. So either, spoiler, a swamp is a swamp. If it's in Germany or if it's in Brazil, swamps still suck. But in that time, I had a number of numerous deployments overseas, but really kind of the big reason for starting the company came from being here at home. So every year the Canadian military gets called out all the time to help support. So Southern Alberta floods in 2013, Fort McMurray every year. It's the same story. The military gets called, we show up, and essentially we bring everything that we need. Troops, aircraft, an intelligence-driven process. What we found though, what I found every single time showing up to these massive multi-billion-dollar challenges is everybody's kind of stuck in 1940. We have lookout towers, people and planes using binoculars and radios. You cannot possibly try and coordinate against these really rapidly growing and highly expensive and dangerous problems. So that was my idea, but I didn't know it yet. So I love the military. I would have stayed in it forever, but a few years ago, I took a really serious parachuting accident and really had to find my next mission. So I decided to do, obviously, coming from the infantry, why don't I start an aerospace company to solve wildfire globally? So that's actually kind of where Craig and I met. So I left the military in June of 2018, went down to a pitch competition, and obviously it didn't go, it probably went the exact way you'd think coming right out of the military. It wasn't necessarily like my friend Karen had a problem, I know how to solve it. It was pretty much, this is serious, here's how we're going to brief this and execute this plan. So what came out of that though was an opportunity to go down to the valley, and this is the actual vision of the company. So solving two key challenges. One, the technology barrier, which in reality is pretty mature. The key challenge is actually solving the regulatory challenge. So like from a first principles perspective, understanding what the root problem is, it's the regulators. They just don't know what the new future of aerospace is going to look like. So two components. One, solving that challenge. We actually design and manufacture aircraft and sensors to allow them, like you're seeing here with the GIF, is an all-weather radar system with some artificial intelligence behind it. This allows our drones to themselves detect, track, and then avoid manned aircraft, birds, or other drones. Keep themselves safe, so we're actually able to rapidly scale these up. So, sounds great. While I was going through a bunch of surgeries to get put back together, essentially, I did a bunch of courses online to learn as much as possible about the market that I was going to go into. I'm actually not finished, so I'm not actually a NAIT graduate because I ran out of time. I had a critical mass of information and had to launch the company. Pitch competition with Craig, went down to the Valley at Tim Draper's program, came first in that program. And the biggest thing I got out of that program, in all honesty, was I got over imposter syndrome. My roommate had a master's in dark matter theory. I didn't even know that was a thing, but I realized everybody has their own superpower. So since then, we had a really outstanding experience back here in Canada through Creative Destruction Labs. And then, of course, COVID happened. So, good. If you're not familiar with who Jocko Willink is, he's a former Navy SEAL commander, and he has a company called Echelon Front. And what they do is they really get the key messaging out about ownership and being resilient. So facing challenges as they come. And for us, for COVID has actually turned out to be a massive opportunity for us. So since COVID, we now have a program underway with Canadian Special Forces. We've filed patents with USPO. We are a NASA technology semi-finalist this year, which is just flattering. We're in a program with Boeing, and most recently I was a NASA or a top 40 under 40. But all this is great, but it doesn't really show all the absolute hard work that has to happen behind the scenes. And the most rewarding thing out of all of this, in all honesty, is building a team and a culture that I know is going to win because everybody else cares equally about the mission. So being an entrepreneur, I love this quote because most days will probably feel like you're eating glass and staring into the abyss. The trick is you have to have resiliency, and you also have to have humility. If you believe that you're being slighted, it's not the way forward. So you have to stay mission focused, and you have to be adaptable on the way. So, because this is about entrepreneurship, my big 4 takeaways: find a mission, and I don't say find a problem and solve it. You have to make it your mission, and choose one that's big enough that you're going to be willing to sacrifice huge amounts of years and hours and time and opportunities to put into. And second, it's humans, not hardware. I think everybody gets this wrong. Making the next widget or mousetrap doesn't matter. Everybody will pivot, products evolve. You have to pick and select talent. Resilience is key. don't ride the roller coaster. I normally like to say it's not about going up and down, the highs and lows. It's about compression and expansion, really. Otherwise, if you go too high and too low, you're just gonna get whiplash and quit. And then always have an ask. So my ask today is really simple. We are essentially a company that has the opportunity of like a SpaceX. And I normally say we're not trying to get bought by Boeing. We're trying to build a Boeing. That doesn't really hold water right now. But what I'm getting at is we're kind of stuck between a guerrilla marketing strategy, which just do cool things and then document it, versus how do we have the credibility when our primary markets are government or defense? How can we have the credibility without seeming as boring as traditional marketing from the major defense primes or aerospace companies, while still holding that credibility and being interesting? So that's my idea that I'd like you guys to help me with today.
How many people in the company now, Cole? What are you up to?
We're 14 today.
Okay, last up but not least, Jason, who showed up with something I didn't understand but learned the process.
Yeah. So my name is Jason H. Let's go to the start. I'm with Jane Cards Inc. So my personal story is that I started playing Pokemon in 2011. I attended Pokemon World Championships in 2013. I was actually not in Worlds event, but I was at the tournament to get into Worlds, and if I had won my last round, I would have made it into the World Tournament. But anyways, fell in love with Pokemon, and I just kind of started small and grew things over the years. So our team includes me in Edmonton, and I have one employee with me also. We have 6 employees in Newcastle, Ontario, and then we have 2 business partners in the United States and 5 contractors in Slovenia. So how I started by buying codes from people locally. We had a league, so it was just kind of people there that were throwing out their codes, weren't using them, so I would trade for them, pay for them, and then I would just resell them to another site. But of course, making a few cents here and there eventually added up over time. With that, I also made other connections with the Awesome Couple and Rare Candy Games. So they just kind of make things even easier. So what we do is we buy and sell Pokemon trading cards, which you can kind of see what the back of the cards look like here. And we also buy codes for the online game. So the codes are basically the letters and numbers that redeem the item that's just below. So for example, this code would redeem for a Vivid Voltage booster pack in the game. So our brands include Potown Store, PTCGO Store, and Buy PTCGO Codes. These are kind of our 3 main selling platforms. To buy codes, we have PokeAwesome Code Catcher and Sell Poke Codes. And then for the physical card aspect, we operate under Prisma TCG, or Prisma Trading Card Games. So our major roadblocks that we've encountered is eBay has suspended my account in 2017. So of course that's a loss of a sales channel and potential huge revenues. Amazon account suspended in December of 2019. All the big people hate us because either we made too much money or they just didn't like what we were doing. So of course, then we also had issues with our website platform, just being not able to make some connections or integrations that we wanted to. And then all these customs requirements and logistics is always an issue. So for COVID pivots, we've focused more on codes and online presence. we've had to increase customer service requirements, and then we've also focused on some shipping aspects and local and global markets. We made some big connections with two businesses in Australia, and now they actually take a good portion of product and inventory, and they kind of keep up that constant recurring revenue. So where we are now, we're working to sign a lease for a storefront in Ontario. This is actually what the storefront looks like. It's not done yet, of course, but we're also always constantly working on our websites, working on community engagement and growth. We started a YouTube channel, Twitch channel, trying to get all that stuff going. And we're also estimating $2 million in revenue in 2020, which is a fairly big number, but I'm glad that it's finally getting there. So our problem is that with a new store, especially in the trading card industry, it's important for people to want to come to the stores and engage with us and help grow the community, because it's a lot of word of mouth advertising for a store and trying to get people to go there. So just some ways we can grow our store, engage with consumers, and grow our team and grow our community awareness. So thank you for attending, and please feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions.
So let's do this. Let's put everybody back in. So if everybody wants to share their camera again, let's go back into gallery view so we can all see so I have questions that I got. The first question that I got is, how do you make money? So if you can give reasonably short answers to each of these questions, because I want to go through all of you and just say, how do you make money? So Peter, how do you make money?
By selling to governments our SaaS.
So do you charge by month? Do you charge by customer? Like what's your...
By year.
So it doesn't matter how big or small the community, it's the same price for everybody?
No, it's about $2 per resident.
So $2 per resident. So for every resident in the town, it's $2 for a voting system, okay? Cole, how do you make money?
We do it a couple ways. One, we actually are working on the execution. So we'll go out, we'll have drones go out, collect information. Then we license that data to the people who did the initial contracting. We then find secondary and tertiary markets to then license that data. So it's a collection, find alternative markets or secondary and tertiary revenue streams for just that one. So our cost of capture is 100% up front. We find,
Daria, so what's your revenue stream? What's your business model? How do you make money?
Our business model is B2C. We sell directly to the farmer, to the user, and right now it's pay per product. So you pay for the device and you pay for each testing chip. But eventually we might introduce a subscription model for the chips, depending on how much farmers end up using.
Okay. And then Jason, how do you make money? What's your business model?
We have B2B and B2C. So with that, we use our distributor product to kind of leverage that, and then also the buying and the reselling of the code card.
Okay. So entrepreneurship. I'm going to go backwards this. I'm going to start with Jason. What's the biggest thing you've learned about entrepreneurship that you think the students should know before they decide how soon they want to get into it?
Honestly, it doesn't hurt to get started. I started this journey 7 years ago, and I haven't exactly gone like straight, but it's definitely getting to the point where it can escalate.
Daria, what do you want the students to know about before you get in? What do you need to know?
Prepare to commit years and years before you see real return on all your effort.
So it takes a while. Cole.
yeah. Turns out being an entrepreneur is exactly like being in the infantry. You're always tired. Generally, you're confused, don't know the big plan. And really, you could tell your friends, but they probably won't even understand. So kind of Kind of the same.
So Peter, what have you learned so far? You're like really kind of in year one that students can benefit from.
Don't be afraid to share your idea, because that's how you get feedback on it.
So question for Daria that I don't know how well applies to everybody else. The question, Daria, is the environmental impact of these one-use or single-use items. How often does that come up, and how do you answer that question?
Actually, it barely comes up because investors don't care about the environment when it comes down to making that kind of decision. But we are aware, and right now it's not something we can prioritize in our product development because we have limited resources. But as soon as we get traction in the market, we are going to allocate some resources to look at more sustainable materials for making the chips. Perhaps like a biodegradable, structure covered by some kind of film that doesn't interact with the reagents. The tricky part is we are using a biologic, so every time it will come in contact with a fluid, which being blood or milk, it might become challenging to make sure that the organic product doesn't interact.
Okay. So while I've got you, team building. What are some of your thoughts around team building? What has worked? What hasn't worked? What are you trying to do now?
Our team is pretty small still, but we're in a situation where we've really benefited from kind of having like these quasi teams where, we just partner up through contract-based partnerships. So, we had to work with the manufacturer. They're working with us on a contract basis, but we work so closely with them that they're pretty much like part of our team. The advantage of that is you're not in a position to like promise them equity or like long-term stuff because things are changing all the time. You kind of you don't want to tie yourself to someone until you're 100% sure that they're your long-term partner.
If you're not with the one you love the one you're with, right?
Yeah, there you go.
Cole, I mean, you've told me some stories about how you had people that joined your team in the early days and how you went down to Silicon Valley and then that team changed. Do you want to share a little bit about the team dynamics and how it's changed and maybe why?
Got smarter. So, and what I mean specifically is everybody wants to look at how can you have a great team? It's not personality, it's character. So there's a huge difference in people that you can get along with versus people that you can work very well with and they have the right character, but maybe you don't go have a beer at the end of the day with. I just put a link in the chat. So if you haven't heard about it yet, there's a book that just got released called The Talent War. It's a bunch of former Mike Sorelli and some other guys. I was just on a webinar with them earlier this week. Phenomenal. This is the entire question that you're posing. Not all the answers are in there, but this will put you on the right track, I believe. And I guess to close it all up, have a process and a system. Don't trust yourself. Make sure that it's a system that is scalable. So like I do, I can't do all the hiring at this point. So make sure you have a process and a system that can then go the long distance.
So before I get to Peter and Jason, my question for you then is, so you had some friends that joined you for a while and at some point you kind of had to let them go. Any secrets on how do you let people down gently?
Directly. And the easy way to look at it is if you're trying to run and somebody's trying to make you walk, then if you start walking, they're going to want to crawl. And then before you know it, it's not going to work. If this is you, drive as hard as you can. I met my co-founder last January after the program down in the Valley, the whole thing. He's former military, mutual friend introduced us. It's been my primary relationship for the last year and a half.
Cool. Jason, so you built out a team, but it's very different. So you had like 6 people in Newmarket, you got some other folks. How did you put together, like the Newmarket team, are they the customer support? Like how did you pick the people to be on your team? And then I'm going to give you sort of a back end. Have you had to sort of remove anybody from your team? And when did you decide it was time to let them go?
So for us, we've actually been pretty good. We haven't actually fired anyone per se. We've had to repurpose a few people to fit positions that are better for them, but we haven't had to yet let anyone go.
So then how did you pick the ones you got? Because that's a trick sometimes too, right?
For us, we found someone that I found a few people that we really connected with and we like to work with, and they have the vision and goals in mind too. So with that, they just kind of took the ball and we've kept running with it.
Peter, thoughts on a team? If you had a chance to do what you've done, but had a chance to do it all over again, what might you do differently?
Honestly, I wouldn't change a whole lot to kind of add what Jason was saying. It's all about the vision. But our motto with our team is ROW, results only work environment. So as long as you're bringing the results and you're moving at our pace, that's all that matters.